welcome to episode
3
of The Joy of Soldering. Today we're going to look at something that's a little different for me. I've never built anything like this before, but I recently bought something from musicding.de, musicding.de, and this is the U-Boat version 1.5, which is a suboctave effect. And what's different for me is that it has a PCB, and I honestly never built anything on a PCB before, which might sound a little strange, but we're going to give it a shot. It's fairly straightforward in I've got a parts list and each component is labelled on here. I don't know if that's going to focus so that you can see it. Let's try. Nope, we've just got a wobbly camera. But yeah, there's a bunch of numbers and I feel like it's paint by numbers. So let's give it a try, put all the components in the right places and let's see what happens. So let's just take all of the components out of the box, the bag first. So we've got our DP3T push foot switch, which is totally standard in guitar stuff. A DP-DT switch here, which is 2 prongs and basically we can switch it 2 ways for 2 different things at the same time. These are commonly used for like bypass circuits. It's the same with this really. We make a wet-dry bypass kind of thing, normally called a true bypass, and we'll use one of these for the LED. One for in, one for out, one for LED. We've got our 2 potentiometers here. One is a beta 10K and the other is also a beta 10K. I actually don't know what they do yet. And we've got a mono, I guess that's the output jack, and a stereo input jack. The stereo input jack will just be the standard power supply thing. And we've got a DC jack. So what I think I'm going to start with is the ICs. Now I won't solder in the actual IC yet, but what I'll do is I'll put these sort of, I don't know what you call them, like a little park for them to sit in politely. And that's just so we don't damage those components by heat, and if the components do get damaged, it means we don't have to unsolder everything and put it all back in again. All we have to do is just take the IC out of its little holder and put it back in again, or put a new one in its place. So we'll start with that first one and just get a little bit of electrical tape just to hold that in place while I solder it down. I won't do this for resistors and capacitors and things. The reason I'm doing it with this is because I can't really bend the legs underneath to hold it into place, which is what I'd normally do with a resistor. Just give it a little bit of a bend in the end, and that's what will hold it in place while I turn it upside down to solder it. As I've tried soldering it upside down, and I must say I am not very good at it. So grab some scissors. It's kind of weird, I've been using these toenail scissors for a while. I accidentally bought these instead of beard scissors, and yeah, I just kind of needed to find a use for them really. So I've been using them for all my electronic stuff. Now, the infuriating thing about this is I can barely see those lines going up, so I'm going to have to be super delicate when we're soldering. So let's give it a try. I wonder if my head's just come into shot. It's not. But yeah, super slow. That one's not a great joint, so we're off to a great start. Neither's that. It's okay, we'll get there. That's a better joint, I will say. Kind of getting the hang of it now, I think. Feels like this stuff heats up a lot quicker than when I'm doing it in ViraBoard, which is good because it means I can just kind of quickly tap each pin into place and then run away super fast. Now I'll just finish up the other side of this, and then once I've done with this side, I'll attack this with the multimeter and just make sure I've not combined any pins here. Be kind of awkward if I have. Okay, so we've connected 2 pins. That's not the end of the world. I'm just going to get the solder sucker from out of my toolbox. These are super easy. You just push that down and then press the trigger when the joint is wet, and it should suck out all of that solder. So I'm just going to find my hot point on the iron. I need to get some better tips, I think, because this one isn't amazing. This might take a few tries, because I'm really not amazing at using the solder sucker. I've been meaning for a while to try out solder wick, but I've not got around to it. Now I think that fixed it, but I don't think that was because of the solder sucker. That joint looks super clean now. So let's check it out with the multimeter. Like we did before, I'm just going to pop this over onto the resistance setting, and you'll see that when I tap these together, needle goes high. So hopefully you can see that. And I'm just going to tap 2 connections together. Yeah, that's great. Awesome. So that fixed that, which is good. Just can't believe that we're so early into this project and already making big mistakes. But I have a feeling that this will take me a couple of sessions to do with you guys, just because yeah, I've never built anything like this before, and I'm probably going to be super paranoid and going back and forth between the build and the parts list to make sure I've got everything in the right place. But I think I'm getting the hang now of how to solder onto a PCB. So what that looks like in the end is we've got that little park, I guess, a little car park for our IC, which is cool. I've never soldered one of these before, so let's pop on the second IC now, just here, and I'll come back to you once I've done that one. Now, one thing that I've just realised is inside these, you might be able to see that there's a dip just at the top here, and you probably won't be able to see on there, but there's a dip as well to indicate the direction in which we put our IC in. And now, while it doesn't really matter so much whether we get the park, I guess, in the right way around, it super matters. It's super important that we put the IC in the right way around, because if we get this wrong, we could potentially burn out a component. I don't know. And while it might not be crazy expensive to get that replaced, it's generally just going to be a little bit of a pain. And, you know, there's delivery times and loads of other stuff. And frankly, I can't be bothered with that. That one's in place. The weirdest thing about this is the electrical tape getting hot. That feels super weird to me. I mean, I imagine it's totally normal, and some of you guys that are more experienced than I am in this sort of thing will just be like, well, yeah, duh. And as I notice it, I'm like, well, yeah, duh. Yeah, it's just super, super fun. So I don't know if you're thinking, well, hey man, what's the point in building a suboctave? What are you going to use that for? Well, the reason why I'm building this one first is because I thought it would be a project that I'd enjoy. But also a couple of other reasons. So I've actually planned to build another drive, which is called the Guma drive that they offer on MusicDing. But that looks to be quite a complicated build, because there's a particular component that is no longer available as one with legs like these. So there's different kinds of components in terms of the way that they mount them, and the only way that you can get this IC is if you purchase it as something that you would bake onto a PCB. So it's like surface mounted. I think that's the term for it, surface mount. So basically the way that they solder things when you're doing it in big production runs is, instead of having a dude that sits there and does this like I'm doing right now, is they will have like a robot, I think, that just puts all of the components down in the right place, and then you very carefully move it into an oven. And I think it's like it must be like a pre-soldered PCB. And yeah, they bake it in the oven. And that means that those surface mount parts just stick straight on. And the reason why I'm not doing the Guma drive is because that IC is only available as one of these surface mount components. It comes with like an adapter board, so you can carefully surface mount it yourself and then solder it up to the rest of the circuit. And that's tough. So I figured I would start with an easier project, and a project with something that I'm actually going to use. And let's just put in IC4. Boom. Yeah, a project that I'm actually going to use, and that'll kind of be a nice little entryway into doing something really difficult. Now the Guma drive that I'm going to look at is based on a dark glass bass overdrive, which, while I use guitars and drop C quite often, I thought that might be super helpful to just to keep a lot of low end in my tone, in my guitar tone anyway, because I've got a few overdrives, and none of them are really transparent except for the Marsden Moore, and while that is like my first ever pedal build, I don't feel particularly comfortable adding it to like a touring pedal board, because it's super delicate and the gain knob is quite scratchy. I will build another Marsden Moore for myself. But not yet. And I thought I'd try this dark glass, because I've used dark glass effects when I've done some work with other bassists, and it's always sounded amazing. Like, mostly you hear it on like metal recordings, but actually I think that could be a really good drive just in any context. And you know, it's probably the fact that there's still a lot of clean signal that you can retain in that is what makes it so good. And when I do bass tones in the studio, I'll often do some frequency bracketing, and I'll distort the low end a lot more than I will the highs, and lots of other fun stuff. But yeah, those are the four sort of icy car parks. That's what I've decided we're going to call them. So I'll just put these back in the bag to keep them safe. And they live in the bag with one of the transistors and an LED housing there. There's actually another smaller little part. I don't think you'll be able to, yeah, you can just about see that, for the transistor, but we'll get around to that later because I cannot immediately see it on the board. I see a bunch of hot squeeze. Ah, there we go. It is right there. So let's put this in as well, and then we'll be done with putting these little bits and bobs in. Now, looking at this, it says there should be 2 transistors on this board. However, I can only see one. It is not helped by the fact that the way that the board is cut kind of covers the number there. So let me just scroll up, because I think that's the mark for Q11. I can see. During this time lapse, I got really confused about where a lot of the components went. Turns out I was reading from the wrong data sheet. The suboctave circuit we have here is based on a circuit by the original builder, so there are a few small changes for the kit that went out. I also proceeded to lose some parts, not really understand what parts I was actually using, then get really angry, and then realise what I should have been doing. And so we've got as well a picture on this page of the finished product, which is great, because that means I can look at it and go, oh, where does the transistor go? And I can see that the transistor goes just below that trim pot. So we'll go right there. Maybe I should have checked that first. I mean, definitely I should have checked that first, but I'm not entirely sure how I would have known. As far as I was aware, I was reading from the U-boat's technical data. But hey. The thing with DIY stuff is they always take a lot longer than you think they're going to. There you go. So that's all of our removable parts put into place. The joy of soldering.